Hi, welcome to part 8 of What's in the Box Mystery Quilt 2019. This is the final part. We have been very busy gathering evidence. As you can see, there's loads of different evidence behind me here, all the way along that we got together in part 7. We are just amazing investigators. So it's starting to really come together, but there's still a few more loose ends to tidy up. So if you remember, there was some evidence labelled 2A and 2B, and it looked a lot like these sort of little bits. We need to do something with those to bring them into the investigation. We also had some 5G and 5F pieces that looked a little bit like this. There was 2 different colours of those and of these. And we need to bring them together now to make something that really works. So we're going to bring them together by joining them together into what appears to be a little house. Now, how cute is that? So we need to make up, there's 16 of each colourway, of the darker colour and the lighter colour. So we can go ahead and do that simply by placing that on there. So I'm going to go ahead and put my little block together so that I can then show you the next little stage. Of course, your notes are going to tell you all this information as well, but there's nothing like a visual, is there? So here's the little block. It's looking quite cute. I've pressed the seam down in towards the block from the little roof of the house there, and we've got the nice little space above there. So now we need to join these up into their rows, and way back when we had some evidence that was marked 2mm and 2M, and they were strips that were narrow or a little bit wider. They're going to go in between our little houses so that they're going to look something like this. So they have the narrow strips in between. At each end of the row, so there's 8 houses in a row, at each end there's one of the wider strips there. So we can go ahead and make, we need 4 rows of 8 blocks with the wide end at each end, and 2 rows will be in the lighter fabric and 2 in the darker fabric. So let's go ahead and get those done, and then we can do the next stage. So I've got my row joined together now, and now we need to put something on to each end. After our wider strip, we need something else on the end, and we've got some previous evidence that was labelled most likely 4C, and we're going to pop that on to the end as well. So as you look at the row, the wider part of this goes up where the roof side of that is. So we can go ahead and put that on each end of our row, and then we're going to do something else as well. So as I'm doing these, I'm pressing the seams in towards this kind of sashing piece that's in between the blocks. Because of the multiple seams along here, it naturally wants to go that way, so let's let it do that. So I've done my row. I've got my triangle on the end, on each end of my rows, so I think things are looking pretty good, but wait, there's still more to do. In previous evidence, you should still have left some strips of this narrow red, or red in my case, fabric, and so we need to join those together. Now where I've joined them, I've done it with a diagonal seam so that we don't get any bulk, because we're going to be folding that over and we don't want any bulk there. So a straight seam would give us quite a bump, but if you do it on the diagonal, that doesn't happen. So I've gone ahead and I've joined my rows, and then so I've suggested that you join all 5 strips that you should have of this, and press them all, and then press them all in half, and then from that long strip cut 4 strips that are about 50 inches long, and that seems to work pretty well for what we're trying to do. So then you want to mark halfway along each one of those folded strips, and so I've already marked mine. I've popped a little pencil mark on. You might like to use pins, you might like to do all sorts of things. I'm not good with pins. They're not good with me because they attack me. Also, you want to mark the center of this strip, because we're going to be stitching this. Remember, we stitched these to some narrow strips, but now we're going to put them onto this one onto this row. So I've marked my center here, so I need to match the centers. And now we do need to make sure things are about the right size with the way we're doing things. So I'm just going to pop a clip in there in my center. And then from each end, you may find your strip isn't exactly right, but we can do just a hint of fudging with all this. We want this point to sit approximately 1 3/4 where the point meets the strip, so that there's a bit sitting out the end there. So I'm going to pop another clip in there to hold that, and I'll do the other end while I'm here.
So same thing, we want that to sit, so all the raw edges are together, and we want this to sit approximately 1 3/4 inches. Now you can measure this, I can pretty much eyeball that with my board. That's 2 inches along there, and I'm going to pop another clip in there. Now that may mean that things just need a little bit of easing or something, but in general your seams are probably pretty good. There's a little bit of easing to go on here, I think, but not a lot. See, I can make that fit quite nicely in there. So go ahead and stitch that on to your strip all the way along the top. Now, do you remember when we did these strips previously, I suggested that you could use a slightly longer stitch so that, oops, we'll get there in a minute. You can do a longer stitch so that, because it's only a temporary sort of stitch, plus also we stitch just ever so slightly less than 1/4 inch in from the edge, so that when we do our next actual seam line, that line of stitching's not in our way. So a little bit less than 1/4 inch, and if you want to, a slightly longer stitch, but just stitch that all the way along the top edge of that strip, making sure that you've got a nice amount out at each end. So that's it. We've gone ahead, we've done a strip of houses there, we've got our triangles on each end, we've got our narrow little folded strip on the top edge, and it is looking good. So there's 2 colours, so I've done all my strips here already now. So I've got 2 strips like that one, and then I've got the lighter colour, and I've got 2 strips like that. And these are just looking amazing. I'm so thrilled with these. And that one's looking good. And then in the other colourway with the darker background, if you're doing that just so you can see how it looks, they look pretty amazing too. So this is one colourway. We've got the triangles on the end, got the dark background in between, we've got the red strip along the top. So quite similar. 2 of those. And then the other colour is that one there. So I think they're looking pretty amazing. That's that stage done, so we're ready for the next bit of starting to join things together. So the notes are going to give you all this information. Let's keep going. We're so close to a conclusion on this. It is just exciting. So, hi. So we've been busy getting all our things ready, and now we're ready to start putting things together. So we're going to start with some of these slightly unusually shaped pieces, and we're going to be making some big triangles. So just so you know that where we've got these strips here which had the little flange either side, we want to use all of the same type of colour one in the same triangle. So these ones are the light colour, so these will all be in this light side. So, and the dark ones obviously will be in one of the other triangles. And so let's go ahead and get some of that sorted. So I'll show you how I've gone ahead and done that. So when we were attaching this strip onto the triangle here, we marked either side in the centre of a piece with a little flange on it. So we're going to need that mark now, and we're going to be joining that to this next piece. And again, we need to mark the centre of this line that's going to join it. So I've actually already gone ahead. I've got a little tiny pencil mark there so that I can match those just within the seam allowance, that pencil mark. So I've done that with both my edges. So now I'm going to match those 2 centres there, and you may find that you like pins. I'm not so good with pins, I'm using clips. And I probably would turn that over so I can see what I'm doing with the shorter side on top. And really all we're going to do is join that, so you may want to pop a couple more in, and we just want to join that along there. So it's really just that shortened edge seam, so that when that flips out, that's going to be part of that triangle there. So I'll go ahead and do my seam along there. So where we've joined that seam, because we had the flange on, we know that we had already had a stitching line that was a little bit less than 1/4 inch there, but now because we're doing a 1/4 inch seam, that will have taken that seam line, that join line away. So we're doing pretty well. We're going to press that now. Now we want to press that so that the flange sits over the light grey, so the piece that it was attached to in the first place. So that means pressing that seam away from that line there. So So looking pretty good so far. That wasn't too hard, was it? We just got a little bit more of that to do. And I've got my piece hanging up behind me here. The next one to be attached is going to be this longer one. Same thing, make sure it's the one which has got the same colour, the same light shade in this case, and that one's going to go above that. So exactly the same, we need to mark the centre. We already have this one marked on the little flange piece, but we have to do it on this piece as well. A little fold might be enough, or you might want to pop a little pencil mark. I'm just finger pressing this time, and I'm just going to place that little fold on my little centre mark that I have there, and I'm going to pop a little clip in. And I would suggest that as you're doing these, you may want to, you can't exactly chain piece because of these extended lengths, but you may want to just do all 4 sides, so keep your 2 lights and your 2 dark sides together, but you may want to do them all to the same stage at the same time. It's kind of satisfying, and it's kind of nice to think you haven't got to go back and do all that again. We give ourselves these little mental treats. So I'm going to pop another little clip in just to hold that in place. That should all just sit quite nicely. You've got bits extending out the ends. It's going to be this quite unusual shaped piece, but that's okay because we're actually going to be trimming that shortly, and I'll be showing you how to do that. So now it's back to the sewing machine and sewing the next stitching line. And again, make sure when we press that we get that flange sitting flat on the strip that it was originally attached to. And so we just need to press that seam that way, just being careful not to press any of the other pieces of flange out at all. So I think you've probably got the hang of that pretty well by now. We've been doing a few of these. And as I said, I'd suggest that you do all your triangles to the same stage at the same time, because it's kind of a nice way to do it, but you don't have to. So we're getting this kind of fun looking but interesting shape going on here. So now we've got to join yet another one onto that. So we're adding this delicious little house row on next, which has already got its little flange along the top. And this time I just wanted to pay, so I've done my centre as I've been doing with the other rows, and we're coming out. So I just wanted to show you how the edge of this one works, because it's there's less sticking out, and we've got this angled end on the house row itself. So I just wanted to show you that this piece of red here just sticks out a little bit. It's maybe 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch longer than the actual row that we're attaching to it, and that should be about the same amount at each end of the row. We want that to sit quite nicely and similarly at each end. So I'll just double check my other end and make sure it's behaving. And actually it's sitting a touch closer, so I'm just going to bring that in a touch so that it does just sit just the way we'd like it to. So I'll just move that centre a little bit along, and I think that's fine. Sometimes when we're doing things like this, we get a slight bit of relaxed fabric here, which we're just going to make sure we ease in. So I'm just going to go ahead now and stitch that seam just the same way I've been doing all along. So I've stitched my seam, and this time, because we want that flange to sit down over the piece that it was originally attached to, I have to press that seam up in towards the houses. So it's a slightly less cooperative seam because those seam lines that join into it, but will absolutely happily sit there with a little bit of ironing encouragement. It probably would be starting to be easier on a bigger ironing board, but this is what I have, so this is what I'm using. So I've gone ahead, I've joined up my 2 rows. This wider background piece is going to be the outside edge. So we now want to mark the center of this piece down here because we're going to attach that to this piece here. So I think you've got the hang of how to do all this now, but I'll just quickly show you when I find my center, there it is, how to do the edges again on this, just to make sure things are sitting quite well, because our rows may just vary a little bit in size, hopefully not too much because we've been really good with our seam allowances. So I've got my little marker just here, and I'm just going to overlap it so that this should be pretty much just the right size, so that it would overlap enough that that would be your sort of seam allowance. So the point itself would probably come no more than ½ inch past your mark on your strip. And I'm going to pop a clip in there, and that's looking like it's a pretty good sizing. So I'm going to pop another clip in to hold it, and then make sure the other end is sitting pretty well as well. And so this is the piece I'm worried about matching. That wants to sit over there, so I'm going to put a clip in there, and that's all sitting pretty well. I'm pretty pleased with the way that's coming up. So hopefully yours are looking just as good because you've been so careful with your seam allowances. I'm going to do that seam now, and then we've done all the joining up. So if you've been doing all 4 of your pieces as you go, you'll have your all 4 triangles done. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that and press it, and then I'll show you how to trim those triangles down. So I've got my triangle together. It's looking pretty good. I'm going to just start trimming off some of these little jagged edges now. So this border here, we can see there's already a nice diagonal there, because what we're doing is doing like a mitered join. And on our centered triangle, of course, that's already at that angle there too. So what we need to do is, if you have a large cutting board, that's perfect. If you don't, I don't think it matters. I think you can make a line with a pencil and then cut it if you need to on a smaller board, but probably if you turned your board around, it is long enough. But I'm guessing you've probably got a long ruler. Hopefully you have. So I'm going to line it up so that the edge of the ruler, we don't want to trim this piece, and we don't want to trim our triangle that we started with. So, but we do want to line those 2 edges up, and you should find that that lines up pretty well through there, right through to there. So we just want to trim off those bits in between. So I'm just going to do that. So I've got it sitting nicely on the edge up there, and I've got it nicely along the edge there. So we just don't need these little bits that are sticking out here. There, that wasn't so hard, was it? Woohoo! And we now have a really nice edge there. But we haven't finished yet. We've got to finish off the rest of it because it's a bit too long for one cut. So now I've got to continue on through here. So now, do you remember when we were here? We've got this line to follow. Put the ruler against the edge there, and we want, I'll just bring that up a little bit further. We want to bring that cut line right through here, but we want to make sure everything's kind of lining up reasonably well, so that we've got a seam and things going through. And to me, this is looking actually pretty close to perfect, so that when we trim this off, we've got enough seam going on there. We're still lined up with that edge there, and we're just going to trim that so that we've got a nice straight edge to join up to the next triangle. So now we need to do the same thing with the other side, so that both sides are trimmed similarly, which is always a good thing when it's a symmetrical quilt. So same thing, I'm going to just do this. I'm going to line it up here so that this is lined up with this triangle. At this end it's lined up with that other piece that's already on that correct angle for us, and that's all looking pretty good again. We don't need all these bits in between, so let's just trim those off. And I'll just do this last bit. So all 4 of your triangles need to be trimmed like this, and then we need to join the triangles together. So this quilt is happening. This mystery is coming close to an end. So just make sure when you do this last trim that everything's lining up pretty well up there. And it's all looking pretty good to me. Everything's looking Excellent. So that's it. That's the triangle done. It's all trimmed. What more could we want than a nice straight edged giant triangle, because we're doing mitered joins. So rather than doing it in rounds, we've done it in these wedges, which I just thought would be a bit of fun. You may not have done a quilt like this before, you may not have done this kind of joining up, but if you just take your time, don't rush it, I think you'll find it'll be absolutely fine. So you don't want to rush the process. I've already joined up 2 of my triangles, so I'll just show you how it's going to look, although I'm sure by now you've got a fair idea about that. So I've matched, coming up here, I've matched all those little seam joins, and you can do that by pinning it together or clipping it together. And the other thing is to make sure that you put the dark strip next to the light strip, so that ultimately you're going to have the 2 lighter ones opposite each other and the 2 darker ones opposite each other. So just be careful when you're joining the big triangles together that works for you. Otherwise, here we are, we've got it together to this point. I'll go ahead and join my last 2 triangles together and join them to this and show you the completed quilts. So I'll just show you how I'm matching these up. So with the little flanges, for example, I'm matching them so that the background matches, the flange matches, and I'm popping a clip in there. Now just remember, when you're on this join up, this is on a bias edge now, this is on the diagonal cut, so it's going to possibly be a little stretchy, so just be careful. If you have a dual feed on your machine, it will help hugely. If you don't, that's okay, just take extra care that it's not stretching as you sew it. So maybe quite a few clips to match up all these little seams and the flanges as you go, because it will look so much better if it's all matched rather than a little bit here and a little bit there. So I'm just going to clip them all together, and then I can sew them, and then I can sew the 2 halves together. So exciting. And here it is, all joined up. This is the whole quilt top joined. It's so exciting. I'm just thrilled with the way it's come out. I'd like to thank you all as investigators for participating and helping solve this mystery. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've joined my slightly darker shades of triangle opposite, and the lighter ones here are opposite there. And the thing to watch with all this is when you're joining up these triangles, because we're working on this bias edge, we don't want to stretch it, but the one that you really have to watch for matching is this corner here, because they were already cut. They were the right size. We're trying to make those into a nice little pinwheel block. So everything else should fit as you go ahead and mark those, match those little corners. Just keep an eye on how things go through here as well, but that is the main one for matching. So I've gone ahead and joined them all up. The other thing to mention would be, when you're joining these big triangles, that you press the seams open. I think it's a really good idea with this sort of thing, and particularly where we've got these bulky bits where the flanges are, that you press those open. So I have joined 2 triangles together in a half and the other 2, and then I've joined the 2 halves together and pressed all of those diagonal seams open. So the other thing to mention too is, when you join the 2 halves together, you can match everything up and you can pin it, clip it, whatever it is that you're doing, but I would suggest that you start at the centre and work out with your stitching, and the same the other way, rather than just going all the way along. There's no real rhyme or reason for it, it just seems to sit better, it feels better if you start in the middle and work out the 2 sides, and then press those seams open. So there it is. And the other thing you'll be seeing is our different, where we split off into teams. We've got a different centre on this one, and we've got this border on this one, depending on which team that you were in. If you were in the other one, and here's the dark version of the quilt. So this one has got this different centre going on here, which is kind of fun with the colours and things, and the border out here is like a checkerboard border. So depending which team selection you ended up in, you'll have one or the other of those with one or the other of those. So there's the dark version, and again you can see that I've done the 2 opposite darks here and the 2 lighter triangles here, and it kind of just gives it a nice little effect. It just makes it a little bit different from just everything being the same. So I hope you've enjoyed the investigation. I've thoroughly enjoyed having you along for What's in the Box Mystery Quilt 2019 with Gourmet Quilter. So thank you and enjoy your quilts. Take your time, you don't have to rush it. Put it together nicely and I think you'll be really happy with the result. It now just needs quilting. What more could you want? So thanks again. So by now you'll have your quilt tops all together, I'm sure. So I just thought I'd show you them all finished. I've got this one beautifully quilted. No, I haven't quilted it myself this time. I've had it done by Busy Bee Quilting in Wellington and she's done such a wonderful job. She's just actually meandered all over it, but it's just come together so nicely. I'm so thrilled with it and it's bound. It is finished. How exciting is that? We've got a nice backing on it and it's an extra wide backing. I find that they're really good to use. And then I've got the other one in the other colourway to show you as well. This one we haven't quite finished sewing the binding, but I have to do a little bit of travel, so I thought I'd better show it to you in this state or not at all. So this is the other colourway and I'm so thrilled, and you'll be able to see, as you already know, that the difference is now we've got the centres are different. When you split off into different teams you did different centres and you also did a different border, so there's this nice checkerboard border on the darker one that I've got here and then this little square on point border that we've done on this lighter version here. So I just thought you'd like to see the quilts quilted so that you know where you're heading with your quilting, because you're going to have all yours finished so soon, I can tell. And that's it for this mystery for 2019. Thank you so much. We'll see you again next year.